Hello and welcome to my workshop. So we're going to be getting on a very fun build for me. This is something that's going to be very special. What I'm going to be doing is recreating my granddaddy's Jeep that he had back when my dad was a kid. He used to take this Jeep out on the beach. It was nothing special, but it was an old military, I think C2J is what it was. And so I'm going to try to replicate that Jeep. And so what I'm going to end up using is the body that came from this truck. Now, unfortunately, I lost the video from the very beginning of this, so I'm reshooting the intro, and you won't see the dismantle, but you know we'll get to right into the action. All right, so let's get started. Okay, since I ended up losing the footage of me dismantling this truck, I just wanted to kind of go back through what all components we have taken off and kind of the vision of what we're going to be doing moving forward. So this truck had these Delrin chassis rails, and I forget what the name, I think L Trail or J Trail, I forget exactly what it was, but I cut these custom to my needs, copying the idea. This is a MRC Pro is where all the guts come from, so this with the transmission, and then this is an axle case for the MRC Pro. Now you might recognize this. It looks pretty close to what is now the Barrage. Now it's gone through a couple owners, I guess, and they have actually made some changes. But this is where it started from with Losi and the MRC Pro. He had the front and rear bumpers on here, a little custom skid plate, and sliders for this. So for the electronics, the speed controller is the Mamba Micro X, and the motor is a Novak. It's the Micro Pro. This is the 380 motor, so a little small. It's a very good motor for this. It's 18.5, and it just works really well. Now, what I'm going to be planning on doing is making a Jeep. So this is just a side profile, and I'm trying to come up with an idea for what I'm going to do for the chassis rails. And what it looks like I'll be able to do is just take an axial SCX10 chassis and probably have to tweak it a little bit. Might have to bend it in and out, make some changes here and there, but I think overall I'll be able to get away with just using an SCX10 chassis rail under this new truck. And so I'm going to have much smaller tires than I had on before, going for a class 0. So have an opening hood and some type of an engine in there, or at least an engine cover. So anyway, just wanted to give kind of a brief overview since we lost the footage, and kind of bring us up to speed with what we're doing. So let's just jump right into the action. Alright, so successfully I have a roller now, and it's probably going to take a lot more little tweaks here and there. Still has a lot to go. Got to figure out where in the world I'm going to put the shocks. Some minor adjustments here and there, but all in all, I think this is going to work. I got the wheelbase pretty well lined up. It's had a couple false starts, had to end up moving some of these blocks around, but I think all in all, it's a good height for the tires, what it is, and I think it's going to work well. So what I have here is I plan on using this little transfer case and mounting that somewhere here. Just make some kind of a plate. You can put in some kind of a metallized epoxy stainless steel plate, put a through bolt through that, and that holds it very solid. As I said before, I'm going to be using this transmission. I'll take this off of one side and probably mount it in a way, maybe on its side up here somehow, maybe make a plate. Not 100% sure where. It's pretty small, so I got a lot of options, but I think a lot of it's going to dictate with where the body sits. But I still think I got plenty of options for moving this thing around, and then that'll just drive into the transfer case and come off to either side. So figure those parts out. So once I get all the major components mounted in here, and then kind of figure out where the battery and electronics and everything will go, I can start building the body. And I think I'm gonna have plenty of room, but still, it's good to have all this stuff figured out ahead of time. So anyway, I'm at a good place right here, so let's just see if we can get some of these things placed in and continue on. Alright, so all of the components for the little Jeep have been mounted up. So I have the servo in the front, and that's just a little, it's actually just a piece of key stock and a piece of flat metal. I soldered those together and then drilled and tapped into this metal here, and then just bolts this piece in. It does add a little bit of rigidity to the front, which is nice. The transmission, that's just a little piece of I don't know, maybe like a millimeter thick steel that I silver soldered directly to the side of the chassis, and then drilled some holes. I did have to notch the chassis rail out a bit here, but you know, with having this thing bridged across it, that notch isn't going to have any kind of effect. Besides, it's still plenty strong for this size of the truck anyway. The transfer case mounted right in the middle, it's just an SCX10 skid plate. I did move it forward from the factory location just so I can get that, you know, somewhat centered. And what I ended up doing is taking some metallized two-part epoxy, pressing that down into the voids in that skid plate, and then taking a thin piece of stainless steel and pressing that in. And what that does is it gives a nice solid backing to fill all those voids in, and then the stainless steel just gives you a nice flat surface to mount this in, this transfer case. The wild bore drive shafts, those are temporary, but I just wanted to get those in there so I could get this thing, you know, moving forward. And it does actually very free moving, everything works really well. I'll replace these with some more scale drive shafts later. They're on order, but like I said, that's just kind of get me down the road for now. I still have to find a spot for the ESC. Luckily, this Micro X is just tiny, and a little receiver here that I decased. So my idea is I'm probably going to solder a piece of metal right across the chassis rail here, and then I'll just use Velcro and just attach this down. So that'll still allow me to have a spot where I could put some type of a side rail or some type of a flat piece that comes out the bottom. I'm not really sure if I want to use a side rail on this, but I might end up having something on the bottom that works like a side rail, but is that's kind of somewhat invisible, so you can't see it from the side. But when you up underneath, it'll add protection to the body and allow you to kind of skate across the rocks. So anyway, trying to move forward now with a couple final relocation of the electronics, and then it'll be getting into making the body. All right, so let's get to that. Okay, so I think we're at a pretty good stopping point here. A lot of good work has been completed, and I think we're pretty confident that this is going to be moving forward and going to not have any real major issues. So, just to kind of sum up a little bit, what we have is XCX10 chassis rails. I won't say highly modified, but slightly modified. Mostly just brackets and things added on. What we end up having is MRC axles front and rear, and these are mounted on leaf springs. And so what I was able to also get are these little small scale shocks mounted in. Now there's a lot of stuff going on down here on this little mount for the I guess it's for the leaf spring, the axle, the shock, and the axle tube. Everything just kind of lines up and goes in that one little spot right there. So that worked out really well. Also have a little plate up here to forward mount the motor, and that is an MRC, a Losi MRC transmission with a Novak little brushless motor. Going to have the Micro X sitting here, a receiver sitting here, and then in the front just made a little bar that runs across, bolts in on either side, which holds the servo. And the best I can tell from the pictures, the front of the Jeep will pretty much be right down flush with this servo here. So that'll be the front of the Jeep, and that'll be pretty realistic because these older Jeeps have just this massive amount of chassis rail sticking out from the front. It's gonna suck for driving, but it's gonna be very realistic looking. I'm gonna cut the back off at some point, but I'm gonna wait till the body's done and kind of see where that ends up being. I'll just make those cuts the very last thing I do. But like I said, all in all, very happy with how this has turned out, and looking forward to getting on to the next steps, which will be actually starting on building the body and getting this thing to look like my granddaddy's Jeep. Until then, we'll see you on the rocks.